Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, Connected Life listeners, Justin here. I'm really excited about today. We have one of our good old friends on here, Marcus Miller, again, joining me. Hey, Marcus.
Hey, listeners. I'm Justin.
Marcus and I have a really cool thing that we're getting to do together again. Yeah, Marcus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys have listened to the podcast before, you may have heard the conversation about the retreat I did with my brother Jeremy. And that retreat was incredible, that I got to participate in with Jeremy, and Jeremy's putting that retreat on again. And it just so happens, that was in Idaho. This time I'm going to do a retreat, the retreat in Wyoming, actually Jackson Hole, Wyoming, at this very famous, kind of like a cowboy resort, ranch getaway that, is a very special place. And we're getting
me some cowboy resorts.
And we're getting to do that over there in Jackson Hole, Wyoming with Wild Courage. And Marcus is going to come join me on this one, and I'm expecting this to be incredible.
Yeah, it's true. I'm going, and also it's over my birthday. So what up?
Yeah, what up? And with that said, just wanted to give everyone a heads up, all the guys out there, if you've considered joining an experience, there's a very limited amount of guys. I think it's 25 spots are total available for the guys that we're allowing into that space. It's happening April 28th through the 30th. So it's coming up real quick in just over a month. It's going to end up happening. And if you're interested in getting involved and participating in that after you heard what the experience was last year, you can go to info@thewildcourage.life, and you can email them or email at that place, and they'll give you all the details and everything on it. It's like, I think it's $1,200. I think they have 5 spaces maybe open left that they had reserved for our Connected Life listeners to try and get a hold of. So that's what you got. You can jump in over there, email them, and ask for Jeremy to direct you on what's going on if you want to try and sign up to that whole process. And with that said,
and come to my birthday.
Yeah, come celebrate Marcus's
Welcome
birthday.
to celebrate my birthday with me. Rarely do I invite randos to my birthday, but this could be your chance.
We had so much. I met so many guys from the Connected Life in the last one this last year who showed up, and that was so incredible getting to connect with them and see the transformation that happened over that weekend for those guys. So anyways, Marcus and I are jumping into this today, having some guy time. And I said, Marcus, what do you want to have a conversation about on this? And he's like, I want to talk about inspiring stories of hope and the process of letting go of control and trusting kind of is like some of what you wanted to talk about. Why did you feel that, Marcus?
Why did I feel that in general?
Yeah.
Well, one, I was on a run and I knew this was coming, and I was just talking to God, like, okay, like, what do people need? And I just felt his tenderness of like, oh, I really want people to know that there's hope.
Yeah.
In a world where like a lot of crap's going down, and if you look at the wrong places, you can see all the wrong stuff happening. And I just felt like people needed some stories of hope. Oh. And so that is one reason.
Yeah. As a side note, it is like, anyone in the world today, if you're on social media, it's just one conversation after another about all the terribleness that's happening. And there is something so suffocating and even drowning when all we can hear is like the negativity and terribleness in the world, because it really makes it feel like, okay, well then what's the point? And it just makes it feel like we're surviving rather than actually thriving inside of life.
Totally. So like, I mean, we talk about this kind of idea, what you focus on will become the reality, at least in your mind.
Yeah.
And so we're not ignoring that there are hard things, but also it's good for your soul and your mind and your body even to connect to hope and goodness. And so getting to tell stories and share moments where we've seen goodness show up and we've seen hope work out and trust work out is actually really helpful for us.
Yeah, I think that one of the things you're talking about is there's a difference between denial, like denying that something exists, and actually having a different focus on what you like. There's this living, like I live with the awareness that the world, there's a lot in the world that is a dumpster fire, but I actually am not going to put that in front of me and stare at that in my life. I'm going to go, okay, there's so much in the world that's messy. I actually don't have the capacity to control all that. There's only aspects of my own personal journey that I can choose how to respond to what comes into my personal space. And I'm going to decide to cultivate a perspective that actually causes me to feel like I'm really victorious, regardless of what's happening around me.
Totally. And this is back to why we're talking about this. Justin came in and was like, all I want to do is talk about something fun. And I was like, great. The one thing that I felt about talking about is stories of hope, which is very fun.
It
like
really
sometimes
is.
talking about emotions we can get lost in the heavy emotions and the hardness of things. And we believe in that. We work through that. And also it can be really fun.
Well, I've talked about on the podcast well in the past, but Abby and I, especially early on in marriage, when we didn't have anything going for us, like I quit my job and we were traveling and we were spending all of our money. We had no idea what we were going to do with our lives. And it could feel drowning as I would think about like, what's my future going to be? It's all going to fall apart. And one of the games that we'd play was a thankful game. And it became a really fun time. Like we'd play it daily to actually combat some sense of hopelessness, especially for me. Like I needed that. Abby was like, woo, yeah, this is my life.
Yeah, Abby, I remember I used to meet with her and she was saying, I'm like, no one thinks like that. Like I feel like personally offended. She's like, what if everything just works out? I'm like, what if, lady? What if everything works out? I feel so mad. I just laugh at her.
It's so true. But I remember for me, like I would truly have to engage in thankfulness. And thankfulness game was taking a moment to look at the beauty that's inside of our lives. Because when we are lost in a sense of fear, like, oh no, there's threats all around me and things aren't going to work out around me. When we start seeing all of that, we shut down internally. We start locking up inside and we become blind. And this blindness settles in. And the thankful game is about like opening our eyes out of blindness and going, what is the goodness that exists? Because the truth is that when I start the process of playing something like the thankful game, I realize not that I'm denying the difficulties in my life. I actually am able to see that there's usually mountains of goodness that are available or have been available in my life that stand in direct opposition to the weightiness of the few heavy things that are difficult in my world.
Totally.
And that's not to minimize the difficult things.
It's creating a fuller picture. Like when we are overwhelmed, scared, insecure, triggered, we see like our vision narrows to the things that we're pulling out that are negative. Yeah. And so games like the thankfulness game or connecting to hope stories, it really engages my vision to see beyond those things. And it is connecting to the reality there's an infinitely good God who is out there, who is constantly finding ways to get into our world. And it's not ignoring pain, it's acknowledging equally that is true.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to talk about this just a little bit more before we go deeper into it. But in my first couple of years of marriage, one of the people that I read his books a lot was Joel Osteen. And that guy's gotten such a bad rap. And I'm like, what? Because he actually is finding beauty in life. He's actually finding goodness. Like, it was hearing his stories, his hopeful stories, that actually got me out of a lot of suicidal ideation. I was like, oh, wait, there's a world where things can be really good and desires can come to pass, where there can be an experience of fulfillment. And it was so helpful to hear someone that would be happy because my soul felt so unhappy about so many things.
So it's funny. People are so scared of someone telling too many good stories because it'll mean that the other side's not real, but they're fine hearing crap stories
all day, every day, standing around water coolers and griping about the worst case scenarios. Have you ever run into those people where the minute you have a conversation with them, you can't get too far in without them being like, let me tell you the most horrible thing that happened the other day that I heard of?
I do know people like that.
Somehow I used to bond over telling terrible stories with people. And that was something that was so deeply confronted inside of me that it was like, I realized I felt so low after having conversations about terrible things. And it wasn't like I was coming up with solutions to any of them. It was just like, and then I hear that someone was murdered.
Totally.
And there was another 5 people that were murdered by the same person that murdered them. And you're like, why was that worth knowing? Like, I didn't need that. Now I just think humanity is garbage.
Totally.
Yeah. And so go ahead.
Oh, I should say, so with that, like, tell me for you what it's like. I always tell people get lost sometimes with the language, where I call it the system of control versus, because people are like, oh, I'm supposed to have self-control. I'm like, yes, but self-control is like healthy self-management. That is not the same as I have a system of control. Healthy self-control is I can say yes to things and I can say no to things. And I have freedom and I have choice and I still have my yes and no in my life. I can say yes to that sweet if I want it, or I can say no to it. And I have both options and I feel peace there, versus the system of control is staunch. It's independent. It's all on me. I have to figure it out. There's no one bigger. There's not like a God who's bigger who cares for me. It's all on my shoulders.
I'm alone in this world.
And so, because I think people need a distinction or they get lost in that kind of confusion. And so for you, talking through why do you have control? Why do people use it? How do you go on that journey of letting go of it or working out of it? Give me some thoughts from that.
Well, first off, self-control to me is an inward working, right? Like the majority of it, self-control is I am managing my insides, how I am choosing to believe about things, respond to the world around me. There is a deep self-awareness. There is choosing to, with self-control, there is recognizing my triggers and my reactions and wanting to be deliberate about resolving those things within me. Whereas the control that you're talking about is this idea of I want to resolve this thing inside of me by reaching out to this thing out here and trying to make sure that all the details are lined out, that I have a very clear plan of action and a clear plan of reaction in the worst case scenario, right? And so oftentimes when I talk about people surrendering control, I'm talking about letting go of your idea and your expectations of what this outcome out here has to be in order to bring you to a place of peace and a place of joy and a place of settledness and a place of happiness. I don't know what your question was, but you're going to ask it again. I just wanted to really distinguish those. What was it?
Oh, you're great. I love that. I want people to hear that over and over, because even I'll have people who are like, no, it's self-control because I can say no to that thing. I'm like, maybe, but it feels like you can't even look at anything inside of you around that area. So like an area would be like sexuality. Someone can tell me I have self-control because I never think any sexual thoughts and I never feel anything in my body. And I'm like, no, you have a system of control that if you shut something down completely and you never look at it and you never acknowledge it, then it's not real. That's not like I'm connected to myself and I can look at that and I feel peace and I can choose out of that if I want to, or choose into it. And I have a yes and no inside of me. And so I often will hear people tell me, I have self-control here. And what I hear them and they explain it to me and I'm like, no, you're just being controlling.
Right. And part of, why don't you explain part of why you're introducing control a little bit further into this conversation?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's what I was asking you about. So for me, I think everyone has a level of control. I think we all grew up in different versions of chaoticness or areas where we felt scared or in family systems where we needed things we didn't get. So probably, truthfully, any area where we had lack that we needed something, we want to control in our adult life because we
Mm-hmm.
want safety. We
Mm-hmm.
want to get that thing met. We want to feel
Yeah.
secure there. And so because we didn't know that trust would get it for us, we started to believe I have to do it on my own and I have to climb my way to that thing, or I have to figure out how to get it. I have to
Right.
micromanage so I can have it. I have to control you as my friend so I can make sure that you will meet the need inside of me. And we start playing this game of control. And so a big area it showed up for me is with like having a good future.
Yeah.
I didn't have a concept because with my parents, and they have their own stuff and they went on their own journey and they have their own pain from childhood. So I don't feel mad at them for this. I think they were trying their best, but I can see in my dad where he felt like I have to make it work. If I don't make enough money, God's not going to. Like, deep down, I think he didn't believe that God would actually show up for him. So he had a system of, I have to figure it out. You have to go to the right school to get the right education, to get the right job. And if you get the right internship, then you'll make enough money to have a family. And so there was like, I think I'm kind of like a ladder. If I climb the ladder at the right time in the right way, then I can get where I need to go. And so I felt a lot of control around if I do the right thing enough over and over and over again in the right timeline, then I get to have a good life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all based upon my performance, my behavior. If I was doing the right things, it was based upon if I got good enough grades, if I made the right connections. Like I was constantly playing that game in my head.
Yep. And what that really does is when we're in that posture, it keeps us from having really radically cool experiences.
Totally.
Because oftentimes we create these limitations inside of our fear and our need to control everything. We create limitations where oftentimes if we're in a posture of trust, we will actually leap and try things that we never would have tried. And so we put our own glass ceiling over us in our relationship with fear and control, which keeps us from these really beautiful stories that are inspiring and miraculous. I think about part of what you're saying, this idea that your dad maybe didn't really believe that there was someone bigger than him that really loved him and was involved inside of his story. And what happens is, we have a lot of listeners that may not even have a faith background. And we have a lot of listeners that do have a faith background. And even the ones with the faith background, they have this idea that there is a creator, but they actually deep inside of their heart don't believe that creator is a really good dad who's involved inside of our story. And we don't know how to have that relational involvement. And there's something about, to me, part of surrender is saying like, I'm going to actually trust that there's a good dad who actually wants to have a conversation with me and is relating with me in this story. Like I know for me, so much of my stories, it was where I was like, I'm going to take a leap of faith and believe that there's a good dad. And I'm going to take a leap of faith and believe that like what I'm feeling in my gut is a potential invitation from him. I may not always be right. I may not have that clear, but that there's going to be like bumper lane, like in a bowling where the bumpers
Totally,
come up on each side, and he's going to begin to raise those bumpers for me if I ask him to participate. And I say, hey, Dad, will you help me see you? And will you help me to see where you've been, where you are, and where you want to be? That all of a sudden these bumpers come up and I bump around until I'm like, oh, there's where he's at. I'm getting a little bit more clarity over and over again through experiences until I'm like, oh, I can see your handiwork inside of my life and I can feel your goodness. And when I look in retrospect to the situations where I had this sense of trust inside of me of going like, I'm going to believe that this is him, even when it doesn't work out to how my brain has an expectation to, I can see how he's making beauty out of even the biggest messes inside of it that I go, oh, I couldn't have made that happen. I couldn't have made the resolution happen from the mess that came up to this circumstance. And so I think part of, for me, I think what we're talking about foundationally here is that the beginning of hope-filled stories and beautiful stories starts with even this thing inside of us that says, I'm going to begin to engage the idea that something is bigger than me and loves me and is involved. And being able to hold the truth and tension that even as we're on that journey, that doesn't eliminate disappointments. That doesn't eliminate messes that the world brings. It just means that there's something to meet me in the midst of the messiness and make beauty out of the most broken circumstances.
Totally. Yeah. As you're saying that, I was like, I remember it made me think of this story. I remember the first time I went skydiving. Well, I've only been once, but it was also the first time. And I remember going up in the plane, and halfway there, I'm like, it can't go any higher. Like, this is so freaking high. This guy's like, this is a joke. And I'm like, are we there? And they're like, halfway. And I was like, no, that's like funny, but like, we're there, right? But no, we were halfway. And they like kept climbing. And we get to the top, and I'm like, I can't be one of those people who like claw on the side and make you drag me out, right? Like, should I do that? Like, will you go back down if I like really cling to the side? But I don't know if they do that, but that's not what happened. I like fell out of the plane. But then there is a moment during the free fall where I felt ecstasy, where I felt like euphoria. I was like cackle laughing. I like felt so much joy. And I remember thinking, oh, if I could remember that this is what it feels like when you know that you have someone strapped to your back that's supposed to pull the chute for you, then when I experience those moments of free fall in life, it could be wildly joyful instead of fear.
Yeah.
Like, it's that perspective shift where free fall is actually terrifying unless you know there's someone who knows when to pull the chute. So this is just wild adventure.
Speaking of that, it reminds me of this dream I had the other night. Did you have more? I didn't know if you...
Oh no, I was saying like that was for me, like the buy-in as I'm going on the journey is like, this could be what life could feel like in moments of free fall, in moments of leaps, in moments of jumps. If I can remember that there is someone connected to me who actually knows where we're headed and knows how to take care of me.
So good. I had a dream the other night. And in the dream, I was in a certain time period after a major earthquake had happened, right? And all these buildings had crumbled to the ground. And then all of a sudden, I got transported in time to before the earthquakes happened. And I realized like all these and I was fine. Like in this future time, it was okay. Like there was messes to clean up, right? There was difficulties, like there was some tragedies, people had to grieve, but it was still okay. And I go back in time and I'm like, okay, all of this is like, people don't understand, but there's an earthquake that's about to happen. But I know it's going to be okay. And I see this Lamborghini and I was like, this Lamborghini is in a building that ended up collapsing. I'm going to steal it because it was going to destroy it anyways.
Why not?
Why not? And so I start driving it at like excessive speed throughout this town and city, and then out into the like kind of like the nature, and then I circle back and I find this it was like this kind of like a fast food joint that my parents were coming out of, and I pull up next to him. I'm like, Dad, and my dad's like, what? And he's looking at the car and stuff, and he's like, Dad, I need you to know I'm from the future. Just hear me on this. I'm from the future, and there's earthquake that's going to hit. And it's going to look terrible for a moment, but it's all going to be okay. I just need you to know it's all going to be okay. And it's interesting because as I was driving, I had a snake that was tame in my hand. And it, random things like this happen in a dream, but they're all symbolic. And I have this snake in my hand, and it goes into my other hand into a bag I had, and it comes out looking different and angry, and it's trying to bite me. But it can't bite through the glove that I have on. And I'm just laughing. I'm like, it can't actually hurt me. Like I could sit and be scared of this thing that could be biting me and poisoning me, but it can't hurt me. And I realized in the dream that I had just gone on a joyride. And this is where this is all going. If we as human beings actually could plug into the reality that there's a good dad and that we could hear from the future, even our future selves. Like there's so many people that they spend their entire life in worry, and here they are on their deathbed and their whole life. Like oftentimes the conversations are like, if you could do anything different or say anything to yourself from the past or give like a piece of advice, what would it be? And it'd be like, stop worrying. Everything's going to be okay. And it's this idea of like, what if we actually trusted that our future was totally okay and imagined a world where somebody was talking to us saying, hey, kiddo, It's already happened. There will be the pains. There will be the difficulties. There will be the need for repair. All of that. It's like saying okay doesn't mean that all of this stuff that we want to avoid disappears. It just means that in the end, everything is going to be able to be taken care of for our hearts, for our beings, for our experiences. There's a promise of some sort of resolve for even the darkest of things. And sometimes that resolve we don't see on earth. Sometimes that's a resolve that's an eternal resolve in some aspects of painful experiences. But what if there's always a promise that everything can be redeemed and repaired and restored? How does that play out in the way that we let down our guards, we stop trying to control, and we begin to participate in miraculous experiences that transcend the normal mundane life that's sitting in front of us?
Totally. As you're telling that story, I'm thinking about 2 years ago. So we moved to San Diego 2.5 years ago. My wife had just lost her job, and we moved down, and we felt like, oh, she's not supposed to get a new job yet. We just like felt it. It felt right, and we moved down to this place called Coronado Island. So it's literally like a island off the coast of San Diego, and it's like kind of honestly like a dream. Like it feels like you're living like a vacation all the time. And you'd think like, oh, she's like, what a nice, like she's just getting to go to the beach every day, relax, have fun. But she was spinning, like every day spinning, looping. I'm a failure at life. What's wrong with me? I'll never get a job again. Like no one's going to hire me. And it was a good season for her to work through. What am I valuable if I'm not working? Like she was working through some of her heart stuff, but she was spinning and spinning and spinning. And then a year later, without even applying, she gets reached out to by TikTok, and now she's working at basically the largest tech company in the world. And now we look back like, oh, if you would have known, like if you then could have seen, oh, I'm going to work at TikTok, making more money than I've ever made in my whole life for a company that loves me and like is giving me so much room. I actually could have just had vacation for 6 months. Now I'm like, man, you're working and we have a newborn baby. It's like life feels so crazy. Like it would have been actually so nice for you to have like a 6-month break before we went into crazy land. But it was her perspective. It was her belief that she's not going to get what she needs. It's her belief that it's all on her to make sure. She would be like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get a job again. Who's going to hire me? And I'm like, someone's going to hire you. And look, they did. You didn't even look for it. They reached out to you. And actually, it's all okay.
Yeah. I think when you talk about Bree and I have similar personalities of stuff that I had to work through, like any of the things she's had to work through. I'm like, I've been there, girl. I know exactly what you're going through. But I remember when I worked for a inspirational speaker when I was in my early 20s, that whole season, I was pretty much looping consistently in suicidal ideation. I remember one day I was working in our office space at our house and looking into the backyard at a tree. And I think I've told this before, but I was thinking like, can that branch hold the weight of my whole body? And it was like so sad and depressing, right?
It is sad, yeah.
And when you think about it, like the narrative that was happening for me in that process was you don't have a future. Like you're never going to be able to get out of this moment. This season of life you're in, serving as a personal assistant and traveling, like this is all your life is going to amount to. Like there was such a dark, ugly voice where I wasn't trusting. Like I couldn't imagine a future where it changed. So what I couldn't perceive in my youthfulness is the idea of seasonal changes, that like seasons come and go. They are impossible to stop. Every life, like every person's life has seasons that are inviting them to change. Now that we can have a lot of resistance, we can bury our heads, we can run from it, but really it's really hard to stop the seasonal changes. They keep happening just like summer, winter, fall, spring. They're a natural part of the system. And what I eventually started realizing with the idea that everything is a season, I could go, okay, what is this season about? And I could go, okay, this season is actually about me learning a very specific thing, growing in a certain area, developing certain types of relationships. And, it's interesting because back then I was like, my life will never amount to anything. And here I am, like, I don't think I'm more special now than I was then because of some of the expansiveness of what Abby and I have done at this point. And there's so much more ahead of us. It's just, if I were to sit down with that young man back there, I'd be like, dude, let me tell you a really cool story. You're going to get married and it's going to be crazy and wild. And you're going to go on a journey and you're going to meet so many people driving around the United States. And you would have never imagined going on a trip like that with somebody. And you guys are going to have your difficulties. And because of your difficulties, you're going to develop emotional health stuff. And you're going to be able to be inspiring people and connecting with people in your future. Like he would have been like, I don't even know how to believe that. In fact, he didn't, because back then I remember I'd have people come to me and give me words that they felt, what they called prophetic words, and then be like, oh, I feel this prophetic word. This is what's going to happen in your life. And a lot of them outlined a lot of the things that I'm walking in and I'm about to walk in my life right now. And at the time, I got so depressed by it because I was like, that's impossible. That could never happen. And so it's interesting. Like, it's only in retrospect can we actually make sense of a lot of these risks that we're about to take, that we're willing to engage. Like I had to look at my life and go, I'm going to stop trying to make sense out of this. And I'm going to settle in to this is the thing right in front of me. And instead of letting it torment me, I'm actually going to find the beautiful gift that's in this moment right now, knowing it's not forever, because the earth isn't forever. My life on earth isn't forever as it is. Anyways.
Love it. So good. Okay. So, let's talk back and forth, just different stories where we took trust leaps. Because I always think it's kind of like the exchange. I think of like, you can't see my hands, but Justin can. Where in one hand, I'm holding control really close to me. And the other hand is the invitation for trust. And I'm slowly exchanging one for the other. And that slow exchange happened choice by moment of, I'm going to try to trust here. I'm going to go on a limb here. I'm going to jump out of the plane here, and I'm going to see what happens. And little by little, I saw moments where I jumped out of the plane and actually adventure was there for me. And actually, I could see how I got taken care of. And I could see how there was someone connected to me, bigger than me, who wanted to show up for me. And it wasn't all the time, but it's not perfect. And we're going to share stories. And we have 1 hour, so we can't tell you all the lows and all the highs. But we're telling stories of hope today because that's what God said. So here we are. Yeah. And so that exchange, I could feel it happening. What are some of those stories for you?
Well, I mean, even going back, I just made mention of when I got married and traveled the United States for 6 months. Initially, Abby came to me and she's like, I feel like we're just supposed to quit work for like 3 months and just do something for 3 months. And I was like, maybe 3 weeks.
Totally. That's just like Abby. She's like, do you think you should quit everything and move here? I'm like, no, I don't think so. You're crazy.
And when I did that, that was a radical act of trust to be like, okay, we'll start driving. We'll see where this goes. And that turned into 6 months of driving around the US and then another 6 months of not working whatsoever. So I ended up in a full-blown year of not doing anything. And at the time when I did it, again, there was so much control inside of me. It's like, no, and that was 2008. That was when everything was crashing and people were losing their jobs and there wasn't going to be a job to go to, like coming back to. And I was just...
So all the outward stability was shaking.
All the outward stability was shaking. And I only had... I had a finite amount of money in our bank account.
Totally. Because mid-20s don't have years of saving.
No, not at all. I had more than most guys did because I was pretty thrifty with what I would build, but it still wasn't a ton. And we end up blowing through all of that. And what happened though in the process is not only did I start getting comfortable with myself, but I started meeting people who had different backgrounds of success along the way. There was many people that had generated wealth that I met along the way where I started seeing their lifestyle of how they were living. And they were years down the road in their path, on their journey. And it started giving me vision for like, oh, me stopping all of my spinning on this hamster wheel led to this miraculous encounter of having these intimate exchanges with people that I would have never had because I would have stayed on my hamster wheel in my small little world. And over here, I'm engaging these people who are giving me like a really focused amount of time. One of them was Paul Young, who's been someone we've brought on here many times. I stayed at his house for 2 weeks. I would have never had that. And that has been a relationship that has continually expressed what love looks like and what stability looks like. And it's been like my one moment to say yes to this wild, crazy journey led to a 15-year relationship, and it's still ongoing, of someone who's a father and friend who's locked arms with me and actually helped me carry me through some of the most difficult and scary times of my life. And that to me is like, wow, how profound is it is that the minute I choose to let go of control, the first person that we really stay with and connect with is going to be one of the foundational relationships that's going to help me in my process of rewiring my entire approach to life.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, honestly, similar. I was living in Cincinnati. That's where I grew up. And I had heard about this school in Redding, California at a church called Bethel. It was like a leadership ministry school. And honestly, like, you probably know this maybe in Montana, but it's not like in the Midwest, it's not like people leave and go do, like, no one moves to California.
No.
Like like my friends from college, it's like, you move, like a lot of them, like, I live in the same like neighborhood as my parents, which isn't bad. It's just like, it's not, I had never known anyone who left everything and moved all the way across the country.
No, not a lot of things get disrupted. It stays pretty consistent.
I just had never known something like that, but I had wanted to go, and I had no idea how it was going to happen. I had no idea how I was going to get there. And my parents, this is the thing where, I mean, constantly people were asking me, well, what kind of a degree are you going to get there? I'm like, well, it's not really a degree school, because no one had a concept for doing something outside of the system kind of idea. And so everyone was like, are you going to get your master's in divinity? Are you going to I'm like, no. Are you going to be a pastor? Well, I don't really know. Like it wasn't because I was getting something and people couldn't understand it. Any of my parents were like, no, we helped you pay for this degree so you can get the internship in marketing, get the job in marketing, and be a marketing manager. And then, because that's what you do, you like follow the steps to build the life. At least that's like what I grew up in. That's what the story was.
Right.
And I didn't know, and not to dig on them, they were not like, we're gonna help you do this thing that is the opposite of everything we wanted to do. They did end up helping me because they're kind, but it took me going on the journey for them to like, fine, we're behind you.
Right.
But I didn't know how I was going to pay for it, because similar college kids don't have money.
No.
We're just trying to survive in college.
Mm-hmm.
And the school I was going to cost money, because schools cost money. And I remember one day the bursar, my senior year, after I had applied and I had gotten into the school, the bursar office calls me in. I'm like, what? Never have I ever been in here. And they're literally like, hey, we have too much money this year. Here's a check for $4,000 or whatever it is, which paid, or $3,000 or $4,000, but it paid for the first half of my school. And I remember I was like, okay, too much money, weird. And I was asking my friends, did you get money? Like, no one I knew. No one got money back. No one got a check from the bursar's office. But somehow, out of them having too much money, I was the one person they decided needed that money.
That's
and
crazy.
It's not like my parents are normal middle class families. So it's not like sometimes if there's like low income, they might do that kind of scenario. But it wasn't even something like that. It was just, you are the one who got this money. And it's what paid for my deposit in first semester of school. And then I got out there, and this is how it relates to your story. I was in Abby's group. Like, out of all the different RGPs, and I actually wasn't even in her group. I was in a different one. And somehow I moved out a month early, and I met this girl who had been with Abby and told Abby, you need to have Marcus in your group. And I remember Abby used to have a thing, which was she will not add people to her group, because at that point she was like, kind of like, people really wanted to be in her group, so they're trying to constantly get in. And I was the one person she added in. And I feel like it is the kindness of God that me letting go and doing this big jump and this thing I didn't understand led to, I mean, now I've been close to you guys for 10 years, and it's one of the things that's changed my life the most, shaped my worldview the most, my career, my wife. And all of it is because of this jump I made. For me, that felt really scary.
Yeah. I think It's interesting. As a side note, I have this little side story about the finances, because like when I went to film school, it was at the end of my film school, and I needed like $5,000 to $6,000 to make a final film to get out of school. And like, I didn't have the money. Like I was just living like scraping by consistently. Right.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking like, God, I feel like in my heart, I was always supposed to be here in film school. Cause I actually got accepted into NYC's film program and Tish's School of Performing Arts and a couple other like major programs. And then I ended up taking up, like, I felt like I was supposed to go to this digital arts program in California. Right. And so it was a really silly thing to even take that option when there were such big name places that took me into their program that were impossible for me to get into those programs, really. And I was like, so I'm here because I took a leap of faith to do this, and I don't like know where this money is going to come from. And I met with some people to try and get some financing. I couldn't get money at all. And I got called in, I swear, same thing. I got called in the office and they go, Justin, this is weird. Somehow you've overpaid. And they cut me a check for exactly what I needed. I was like,
so crazy.
What? And again, it had to do with like, there was this unction inside of me. There was a trust fall, and maybe I did or did. It wasn't like I felt like I was being controlled by a creator. It was like there was a thing inside of me that says like, I really feel like there's a wiring for me to participate in this journey. And I feel like such a strong pull to partake in this. And I'm going to actually run and leap in this thing that, like, even if it wasn't, there's like this radical amount of grace that comes and goes, hey kiddo, that was just something you wanted to do really strongly. And yet I met you inside of a strong need in a way that you couldn't even imagine was going to resolve things for you.
Yeah, totally.
As a side note,
also to be clear, my parents did help me in that schooling process, but the check is the thing that like onboarded, like, okay, this is happening.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great to give them accolades because they're a really big part of that. Even
Yeah,
though,
it's
like,
one of the areas I felt really loved by them is showing up in that way.
Yeah. And my dad did too. He ended up participating. He ended up writing debt off for school debt that I had with him and didn't hold me to it. And then honestly, I want to actually brag on him. This is another really beautiful story. Like, it's the kindness of God through strangers and loved ones and relationships, like where some of the most beautiful miracles show up. It's the people around us that are faithful to moving with compassion and care and empathy on our stories. Like, that's the tangible expression of some of the best miracles. Like, I remember when I walked out of that school, because I was taking loans from my dad, which I'd worked my entire life for him. And so he knew I was good for the money and that I was going to pay that off. And, you know, there was probably, I don't know, $80,000 or something that I owed him, or $60,000 to $80,000 at that point. And he handed me a card at graduation and he said, debt free, go live your life. And I was like, what? And I just was so wrecked by this moment of him saying debt free. And honestly, it was him doing that gave me permission to actually go engage the speaker that I went to go be with and work for. And when I went to go work for that guy, that's where I met Abby in my travels. And it's like, you watch as all these beautiful things starts unfolding, even though it was difficult in that season. And I was working through like emotions that I didn't even understand were coming from my childhood pain. But everything was moving towards, Justin, you're longing for repair inside of your life, you're going to get it. You're longing for a life of goodness, you're going to get it. Even though like our life has been filled with the difficulties of Abby being sick and me being sick. I was supposed to die in 2016. I was at the verge. I was saying, God, I'm ready. Just take me. My body is in so much pain. I'm ready to die. I need you to either end my life or bring a miracle. And a woman comes across my path who got powerfully impacted by Abby's message and a moment with Abby, and says, I want to touch your guys' life. I want to impact your life. I want to see you travel around the world. And I'm like, I don't need to travel around the world. I need health. And she's like, actually, I can take care of that. And $250,000 later worth of value in 2017. And I have my life much more back on track than I did, and continually was like helping my body to be what it is like right now. Like I'm here right now. What I didn't know is I had 2 months left to live. And again, it wasn't by my own figuring out how to control the situation. It was me being wildly out of control and saying, Dad, I need you to show up and do something somehow inside of this. And miracles start getting deposited right in your lap. Mm-hmm. And it was through people. It wasn't just money just showed up in a bank account. It was someone that said, I'm here. I couldn't have made the amount of money that I needed to try and save my own life.
Totally.
It was, I'm going to walk something out with you and we're going to gradually find a solution in this.
Totally. That's literally so good.
And I think that one of the things that we discount, because oftentimes we have a really hard time leaning into letting people love us. So in a past part of my life, I probably would have rejected her offer, right? I would be like, no, I don't need that, or perceive that there was an agenda from her or anything. Like, it's so unnerving to allow people to love us, but the miracles of God that are waiting to find us are there within the space of us being willing to let love in, to go, I'm actually going to allow myself to be in a posture of need and be exposed and allow people to do something extravagant for me, even when it pushes on all my buttons that say, I don't believe that I'm worthy of this. Actually, can I tell one quick story?
Do it.
As I'm rambling.
Tell the story, bro. Tell the story.
This is just funny. I was in Target, and there, I'm telling on myself for being a nerd. There were these new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action figure sets that were coming out, and it was during Target's what they call the Holothon, and I kept going in there waiting for them to be stocked, and I was like, oh man, and I couldn't find them. Then one day I was driving and I was going to go to the office, and I heard internally, they're there now. If you want them, go now. And I'm like, oh, it's happening. And so I drive over there and I go running over to the action figure area, and I come around this corner and there's this lady and her little kid right in front of a freshly stocked pile of everything that I wanted. And she was like, this is incredible, Ninja Turtles. And she's like, she's like wanting to buy one for her kid. And I want to shove them both out of the way and just start loading my arms up and jump around screaming at how excited as I am. I'm a total little kid again. And I back myself up and I'm like snagging them off the side around them, like not getting in their way, but grabbing them. And she's like, oh, do we need to get out of your way? I'm like, no, you're totally okay. And then all of a sudden I have like $30 in $35 cash or something in my wallet. And I'm like, I pull it out and I give it to her. And I'm like, I want you to have this. You buy something for him, because my mom bought me action figures as a kid, and it was so special to me. And she's like, oh, that's amazing. Like, no, I don't need this. I'm like, no, do it for him. It's going to be fun. The second part of the story is I got what I need. I go out to my truck, and I remember I have cash hidden in my vehicle, like $200. And I'm like, I need to go back in there and give her some more money. And so I go running back in and I see her, and I run up to her and I go, here's more money. And I hand her $100, and she's like, what are you doing? This is way too much. You can't do this. And I go, I just did. And I run off to go do something else. And I still have the other $100. And I'm like, oh, I need to give her the other $100 as well. And so that comes circling back around and say, hey, you. And she's like, what? I'm like, here, take this. And I smash it in her head. She's like, what are you doing? It's too much. I go, quit rejecting blessings. Quit saying they're too much. You need to receive your blessings. And then I just run off laughing, and then end the story. But my point in all of this isn't about me giving away the money. It was about the idea that she wanted to reject the gift that was being delivered to her in her hand in this moment. And she couldn't, she's like, hey, this stranger is bringing something to me, and I have a heart posture of this is too much. I'm going to reject this. There are miracles and hopeful experiences that want to find you in the middle of your circumstances, and they keep trying to bombard your life. So many of us out there, and we have to actually get our hearts in a posture that says, none of it's too much. I'm not going to live a life if it's too much. I'm going to live a life of like, it's just right. It's exactly what I needed. That's incredible.
Totally. Yeah. As you're saying, I'm like, oh, this is some of the shift we're talking about. Is I actually needed to slowly start shifting my internal system to receive the things that were coming my way. I remember, so the school that I did it's 3 years, and then it's the third year's an internship. And so I was interning for Abby, and there was 5 of us interning for her. And at the end of the year, she's like, hey, I've often found that if people will stay up on with me for 2 years, they get even greater breakthrough. So also there's this invitation like, hey, would you want to do this for another year? And every other person on the team was like, oh my gosh, yes, what a dream. Like they're all like so happy. And I involuntarily out loud yell like, ah! And then I fall on the floor out of my chair. And it's because her invitation was pushing against my system of belief. I already, every year that I stayed, I was like, because at first I was like, oh, I'll do 1 year of this school. I can take 1 year off of life. Like I can just tell like, marketing person, I was doing a spiritual walkabout. Like everyone takes like a year off. It's like kind of cool still, like I went to this state, I did this thing. You can like kind of play it off like it's this cool thing. But then every year I stayed longer, and the longer I stayed, the more it was pushing on my system of, I have to make sure I get where I'm supposed to go. I have to make every year longer I was thinking, who's going to hire someone 2 years outside of their career? Then another year, who's going to hire someone 3 years outside of their career? How will I ever make money? How will I ever be stable? How will I ever attract a spouse? Who wants to be married to someone who's working at Starbucks still at whatever age? No, I'm working. It's pushing on the system. And so Abby invites us into another year. And it so confronts the part of me that believes I have to make sure that I get where I need to go to have a good life, that I fall out of my chair. And it was not like oh, I fell out of my chair one time and now I'm over it. I remember I had to wrestle through choosing in. I had to wrestle through. I always felt so out of control that I had a dream, and in the dream, and I always think like, people represent things often. And so in the dream, Abby came to me in my dream and said, are you going to let go of control or not? And it was God coming to me like, hey, I know that this is confronting that system. I know this invitation feels scary. I'm letting you know you can choose to let go. And even in my dream, I remember being thinking like, I'm not sure. Like, I know that you're showing up in my dream to like invite me, and I'm still not sure I'm returning the like yes to you. And then in my dream, people showed up and they're like, okay, fine. And they started praying for me. So even in my dream, my soul couldn't say yes yet. And then even in that, people showed up in my dream to like help me. And I remember I woke up in the middle of feeling the presence of God. Like, oh, this is so weird. What an interesting experience. And then I told someone the dream, and they're like, obviously, this is an invitation to say yes to this thing. So even after my dream, I still was like, I don't know. But as I worked through it and I did the exchange of, okay, could I trust that if I say yes to this thing, where honestly, my soul was getting so free. Like if I could think outside of just building the career and making the money and like that system, it was the best invitation ever. I was the most free I've ever been, the most alive. I felt the most joy, the most presence, the most stability that I had ever felt in my life. So if I could let go of how will I have a home in 20 years or whatever the things are that we do. If I can let go of that and just be present, I'm like, yeah, this is the best choice ever. If the purpose of life is to live to the full and be present and to know what love is like, then this is the best invitation I could ever say yes to.
Yeah. Learning how to make the right decision for right now.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is. It was about the right now. What is the right decision for right now? What is the right decision for 40 years down the road? What is the right decision for right now?
Totally. And so I had enough of a yes in me to trust. I had enough small moments where like, oh, the money came in. Oh, the right person showed up. Oh, and the right timing, the right job showed up to help me get through this thing. Like I had enough of the small moments on that journey with trust that in that moment I was able to, okay, I have enough of a yes in me to say yes to this thing. And the funny part is the two things I was really concerned about is how will I ever get a career? Yeah. And how will I ever get a spouse? Like those were the two big things that my control system was like glaring at internally. And that year is the year I started dating my wife. Yep. So we weren't dating. We started dating that year. A year and a half later, she was 2 years later, a year and a half later, I think she was my wife. And that is the year that I started doing consulting training with Abby and Justin. Yeah. And so it's also the year that I got my career. And it's a career that I could have never made up in my head.
Yes.
Where like I get to make my own schedule. I have a kid now, and it's like, oh, I get so much time with my kid because I get to decide how my hours work. My wife and I get to connect so much because I can do a gap for lunch and we can go on a walk if we want. Like there are so many parts of my life career wise that I never could have made up in my head. And I would have never married someone like Brie.
Yeah.
Not because I wouldn't have wanted her, because my system wouldn't have chosen someone like her, someone who's so kind and so tender. I needed to go on the healing journey so I would attract someone like her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up with a spouse where I'm like, this is better than I could have imagined.
Yeah.
And a job that is better than I could have imagined. And I could only get there through trust.
Yeah.
Because outside of trust, you can only get to the life that you can make up in your head. And I'm living things.
That's it. Yeah.
Kind of saying, I'm living things that I wouldn't have known how to make up. Even now, like I'm living in San Diego. Never ever was on my radar. Wasn't an option in my head. Wasn't something I ever thought about. And Brie and I followed the crumbs with God, like the trust, the like breadcrumbs. Okay, if we follow those words that lead, and we end up living in a town by the water. And I'm like, this is a dream. Often, I feel like most days I walk out to my back porch and I think, I never could have imagined a life this good.
Mm-hmm.
And I got here by saying yes to invitations that felt scary and adventurous.
Ugh, I love that. And by the way, didn't you have a former employer in that season when you told them like, hey, I'm going to start working over here in this, or I'm going to take that third year with Abby? It was either you told him you're going to take the third year or you're going to start consulting. And in his own right, he pushed back didn't he push back on you? Do you remember who I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about. And yes, well, they definitely weren't happy. It was the fourth year because it was like, okay, you're doing 3 years. After that, they wanted me because to go in that year of school, I was doing some sales on the side, like a part-time sales job while I was in school. And then I decided I was going to do the second year, and they were wanting me to do more full-time with them in sales.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, that's not what they were wanting or expecting, but it felt right to me.
Yeah.
And so I was just willing to face their unhappiness.
Right. And I think that's part of what I wanted to point out is that there are people around you with their own emotions about your decision making because of how it potentially was affecting their world, which it's totally normal. It's totally okay that they had those emotions, right?
I don't think he's bad for that. Like, yeah, that makes sense that you wanted someone to work full time eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally real. But for you, knowing like, no, the right choice for right now is this thing, and it's going to disappoint people and it may frustrate some people. It's not bad. It's not evil what I'm doing. It's just disappointing for their expectations of what they're hoping for and wanting. But in doing so and going against the grain of other people's expectations or fears or needs or whatever, and going, I know that I need to participate in this. It led to this beautiful unfolding. And the story isn't done. It's just like you're midway into it. And here you are like living in a dream place that you would ideally love to live with a wife that you really love and a beautiful daughter that you have. And for you, those are things that really have mattered, and you're seeing those experiences. And, even if there's parts of it that you don't get, it doesn't mean we always get everything that we want. It's just like, there's parts of your story that have a lot of beauty inside of it. And it's been on the journey of trust and enjoying what's right in front of you and letting go of control, which is, again, what we're getting down to. It's like, I know we're almost out of time, but it's like, even when I felt that invitation to come here to Redding, it is not the place that I wanted to be. I wanted to be in LA, which now has, been desolated by like life.
Totally. A lot of things.
A lot of things. But I did not perceive that the environment or the community that was here was going to be a stepping stone for me to get all of the necessary interactions to build my business the way that I built it. I wouldn't have had such a concentrated group of people that were all wanting to get some form of transformation for me to grow and develop in my gifting by having exchanges with them. And it's like, Oh my gosh, it's because I trust and I let go of how I thought life had to unfold, letting go of how I think life has to unfold, and embracing, and we've talked about this many times on the podcast, embracing the idea of expectancy versus expectations. I let go of how it had to look, and I started to go, oh, I just know that there's going to be beauty somewhere inside of this as I keep following my gut internally. It's just,
I mean, the truth is we were not trying to come to San Diego. It's not like this was our dream.
no,
Actually,
not at all.
Bree had said, I will never live in SoCal. Like that was like literally her direct quote to me. Cause she would have told you, oh, surf bro culture is so dumb. So she like, it was never on the radar. Actually, we were trying to move out of state because we have our own businesses and sometimes taxes are not the best here. And so we actually had plans to move to Cincinnati because some of our best friends were moving there and my family's from there, and you can buy houses for much more affordable than California.
Yeah.
And so when San Diego became a thing, we were both like, what? Like, how is this going to happen? What's going to happen here? I had never even been before. We visited one time, and on that trip is when we felt like it was the right move. And even then, I still was so caught off guard by the idea of it that in my own soul, like I was like, oh, it's a stopover. Like we'll be here max 6 months. So much so that when we rented our first place, we literally told them we cannot do a year-long lease because we don't think we'll be here this long. Will you do 6 months? So they altered the lease for us.
Oh, wow.
Because we so believed it was just a stop off for us.
Wow.
That's like how much we were not bought into San Diego and bought into a different idea.
And that was all initiated, not to get too depth into the story. It was really, there was so much initiated because Bree had a dream, right? You know, and it was like, oh, I had an actual dream and I saw this happen, and okay, I'm going to lean into something that feels like it totally goes in opposition to what I think I want or how I think my life should be unfolding.
Totally. And then we kept saying stuff like that. It's literally like moment where things where this doesn't make sense to us. This isn't what I thought. This isn't what I was planning.
Yeah.
But I'm saying yes to this adventure. And now we've been here for 2.5 years. We live in a different area. And even that, there is one house that is in North County, which is where our friends lived. And would come up and I would drive by this house and be like, God, that's the house I want to live in. That's the house I want to live in. One, because we have a specific taste and style of house that we like. And the area we live, it's a lot more like beach shacks or like newer developments. And that's not our style. And somehow, when it's time for us to move to a new house, the one house that I had been for months driving by saying, that's the house I want to live in. I would like drive by like, that's the one. That's my house. I want to live in that house. And I didn't know if it was going to happen or not, but I was letting it know. And like, if I'm going to move up here, that's the one I want to live in. And actually on the journey of choosing where to live next, because we were having a kid and you can't live in a 1-bedroom apartment with a baby. That's a disaster.
Totally.
And so we actually had seen a different house, said yes to it, had the lease papers. And I had this thing inside of me of, okay, I actually still feel like I want to explore this other area. And it feels scary because the house we just got is a dream for that area and so affordable. But I had this part of me that was like, I've done enough trust journeys that I know that something else will come if it's supposed to. Like actually, if we let this one go, which felt scary. And I think it was even hard. Bree was like, this for me is kind of the dream. So it was hard, like, babe, I think we need to let that go. But I had enough belief in me that if we let that go, and if something else doesn't, like something in North Carolina doesn't happen, I know something else good will happen in that area.
Yeah.
Because I trust that God will work it out. I trust that something bigger than me is on my team more than just me making all the right decisions.
Yeah.
But then saying no to that, which felt really painful and scary. 2 weeks later, the house that I had been for months, for literally like half a year, telling God I want to live in that house, all of a sudden comes up for rent. We applied the day of. There's 200 applications. The rent market in San Diego is kind of insane. It's literally in one day there's 200. And somehow they pick us. And we get this house that I literally didn't even know it was a rental. I just kept telling God I wanted to live there. and it feels like a dream.
Yeah.
But it was bumpy getting here. And it was a lot of step-by-step exchanges of, okay, I don't understand, but I'm going to say yes one more time. I don't understand, but I'm going to take one more step forward. And now I feel like I look at our life and I'm like, I don't know how I got here. 2 years ago, I was living in a 1-bedroom house or 2-bedroom house in Reading. And now I'm living in this house in Cardiff by the Sea, California. Like I couldn't have done this. It wasn't on my radar. It wasn't an option in my head of something to even be thinking about.
Yes.
I just said yes over and over and over and over and over again, the best I knew how. And now I'm here.
Oh, I so love that. I couldn't help but laugh at as you're telling your story about even coming to intern with Abby and that journey. I keep thinking of our life consulting masterclass students who have all been like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to jump in this journey with you guys for an entire year. And I'm going to go on this and see what happens. And some of them are like, I don't even know if I'm going to be a consultant. I just know I'm going to do this whole journey with you guys. And I think about them. I'm so proud of so many of them, where I see people like that who are going like, I'm going to roll the dice and see what this process brings, what it does inside of me, how it, and we're always talking about to our students about that, where it's like, hey, let go of what you think you have to get out of this and start posturing yourself, believing that you're going to get what you need. The difference between what I think I'm supposed to get and want out of it, and I'm actually just going to get what my heart needs, and I'm going to see that in retrospect. So, and that's something that you've always done, is you ended up getting what your heart's needed when you let go of what you thought it had to look like.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's so cool. Well, I know we got to wrap it up. Marcus, I am getting really excited about this men's trip with you. I hope other guys come join us on it. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. I hope people enjoyed our stories and our conversation around this, and that it starts like poking into like, what are the things that in my life where I'm not actually trusting, I'm not taking leaps? Where are the stories that I need to focus on in my life that have been really good stories that I need to marinate on? Where are the stories out there where there's actually been really good things that have happened, even in the midst of all the messiness in the world? Like if we can create an army of people who are living that lifestyle, there's such a profound change that can be made on this earth by people who live that lifestyle.
Totally. I thought for me, it was often, I didn't know how to believe for something I hadn't seen yet. And so there's a part of being around you and Abby where it's like, I saw something where people were choosing to let go. And actually, life was showing up better than they could have imagined.
Yeah.
And I remember a pivotal one for me is I read this book called Love Does by Bob Goff. And it was a story of wild adventures with God and things working out. And I thought, what if life could be like that? So like I would literally think, I'm going to put in front of me people and stories and talks of people sharing stories of how they let go, and actually a wild, fun journey unfolded.
Yeah. Man, even speaking of that, if you've been listening and you're like, wow, I would love to be part of their community in the future, like their life consulting masterclass. We're not taking applications right now, but we are building an application list. And so if you want to email us at support@stumvalconsulting.com, we can get you put on a list to let you know when the applications are opening up and stuff like that, and get you all that information. You can do that. And yeah, with all that said, any place that you want them to reach out and find you if they want to find you, Marcus?
Yeah, they can on Instagram, marcus.j.miller, or my website is marcusmillerconsulting.com, and you can just reach out that way.
That's awesome. Anyways, I've had a lot of fun hanging out with you here today.
Yeah, this is fun. I loved hearing your stories.
Yeah, me too. Listening to you, I was like, oh yeah, that's great. I love that. Anyways, hey everybody, go away.